Hi there, my name is Valeria Lindstrom. I'm a Russian girl living in Spain. On this channel, I observe Russian politics and translate the videos created by the representatives of Russian civil society. In the description box, you can find the link to the video about me. Today, we're going to talk about the Putin's repressions in 2022 and about the key changes in Russian legal system. In addition to the full-scale invasion of Russia, the Russian government has been accused of the significant internal repression. This has included numerous arrests and criminal charges for individuals who have made anti-war statements or speeches, as well as the blocking of hundreds of thousands of internet resources. Additionally, there have been cases of state treason, resulting in several sentences. But before we start talking about the statistics, I want to draw your attention to the fact that over this year, we haven't seen a qualitative shift in repressive practices. But what does the qualitative shift mean? It doesn't refer to a shift from bad to worse, but rather from repressions of the previous type, which were intended to intimidate, to repressions of a totalitarian type, aimed at extermination. Mass-targeted repression differ not so much in quantity, but in their purpose. Mass repressions are typical of totalitarian systems, which aim to transform the society. For example, there may be a super valuable idea to create a space for Aryan race, or to build a communist state. Those who do not fit into this bright picture of future should simply be destroyed, which means that totalitarian repressions are not made for actions, but for belonging to a certain society, to a certain class or group of people. Not for what have you done, but for who you are. In fact, the closest Russia has come to this totalitarian ideal over the years is the repressions against LGBT community. They are not repressed for actions, but for belonging to a certain group. Currently, our repressions are truly demonstrative and terrorizing by nature. It works like this: you intimidate millions by repressing only one. Intimidation is systematic and is aimed at squeezing dissenters, which is typical of authoritarian rather than totalitarian systems. Of course, it is important to understand that this classification is not an attempt to find something good in this situation. No, it's not a matter of saying, oh, how great it is that we are not burying thousands of people in mass graves. No, there is absolutely nothing good in the authoritarian repressions, but it is important to understand what we are dealing with. If we take a look, for example, at the Belarusian experience, it is much closer to the mass repression than Russia. And it is considered that Belarus is 2 full years ahead of the Russian Federation in terms of political development and administrative evolution. However, from the standpoint of the percentage of the victims per 100,000 of population and the percentage of politically repressed individuals, Belarus is certainly far ahead of us. So as we know, the so-called social contract was violated. But what kind of social contract was that? That we don't interfere with you and you don't interfere with us. Nowadays, Russian government is interfering with individuals. They mobilize them, they try to control their private lives much more harshly than ever before. They come to schools with their ideological message, which was not really observed before. Maybe if we're not talking about the Ussr period, if we talk about the Russian modern history. Moreover, they cut off access to the first world for the elites. But what do we get in return? Nothing special for the simple citizen. And the elites are offered the following, as the president said in his message, openly. You will no longer go to Europe and America, and there is nothing to regret. They won't give you back your money, and I warned you that you are second-class people there. But there are many other countries where you can go. And secondly, it is implied that the elites will not be touched. There is no more struggle against corruption. Do whatever you want, my friends. And in general, the word corruption is now a semi-obscene word for us. The whole process of getting rid of old norms, albeit conditional, but at least some norms of publicity and anti-corruption standards, tells us about this. For example, there is no more need for authorities to publish a declaration Yes, it still needs to be submitted, but to the presidential administration and not to be made public. Russia is withdrawing from the European Convention on the Fight Against Corruption. Moreover, Transparency International has been declared an undesirable organization. The fight against corruption is declared a Western heresy, nothing else. But what does it mean for the ruling class? Enrich yourself and fear nothing. You will earn from getting these new territories on the defense orders, and we will not touch you. So if there was any sort of fight against corruption before, now corruption is encouraged. Anti-corruption activities are now strongly associated with Navalny, and Navalny is the enemy number one. If we talk about goals of repression, then the number one goal of the current autocracies is the persecution of organized protest. Not protest as such, but the organized forms of it. And Navalny is the embodiment of such a protest. He is the main organizer, so to speak. He is number one. So let's talk about statistics. Criminal cases under articles related to censorship have been initiated against more than 200 people in 2022. Which articles do people receive criminal cases for? The most serious article is Article 207, Part 3, for committing acts aimed at destabilizing the activities of government bodies. Currently, people are mostly receiving sentences of 6, 7, 8 years, which is still a lot. These are long and terrorizing sentences, but it's not the maximum. Maximum is 15 years. Cases are being brought against known people, even those who are abroad and cannot really be punished, like Nevzorov or Belotserkovskaya, for example. As for administrative cases, the most popular article is 20.3.3, discredit of armed forces. So what constitutes discredit? We know of more than 5,000 cases in 2022. This is a lot, even for such a big country as Russia. So what violations have been recorded? The most popular way to discredit Russian army is to write something on the internet. Posts, comments, likes, reposts, and even changing of your avatars. These account for 38% of all cases. On the second place, there are individual pickets, as well as participation in rallies, characterized as silent support. If previously it was written in the protocols, shouted slogans, for example, now they simply write silently supported. This category accounts for 34.5%. On the third place, there are different sorts of hidden resistance. So graffitis, leaflets, stickers, yellow and blue clothing, or even shoelaces. Soon we will be prosecuted for manicure. The next group is 6.7%, who are charged for oral conversations. This number is relatively small, but still not less scary. Speaking out in a public place it is, in church, at school, anywhere. There were two popular cases, one on the subway and one in the restaurant, where people were just discussing the war and someone heard them and reported on them. And last but not least important, 0.7% were accused for singing Ukrainian songs. In the Russian legal system, it's called audiovisual expression. The most amount of bandits we have in the Northwestern Administrative District, and the most protest city is St. Petersburg. Men get caught more often than women, and the average ratio is 60 to 40. Women are less likely to be charged with criminal cases, but there is no significant difference when we talk about administrative cases. Regarding extremist and terrorist cases, 2022 was a record year. More cases were opened than in 2021, than in 2020 and in 2019. The popular article is about justifying terrorism, participating in terrorist communities, as well as knowingly making false reports on terrorist attacks. In other words, if you write about certain events, you may be charged under these articles. The number of cases related to terrorism has been increasing since 2010, while the number of terrorist attacks itself has been decreasing from 2010. The most dangerous region is Dagestan, but the growth of terrorism cases is observed in regions where no terrorist attacks have ever been seen before, like in Komi-Permak district, for example. Regarding the extremist articles, Article 282.2 is the forefront, and there is persecution of Jehovah's Witnesses in connection with this article. 677 people are under investigation and trial. Here, I would like to highlight that when this article appeared, it was mostly used against Russian nationalists. Yes, they exist. Now you can use this article against anyone, any political opponent. If we talk about specific cases, we cannot fail to mention the case that is called Yefremov case. This is the case about a girl with a drawing. It was very, very popular, was discussed all over the world. So the girl made an anti-war drawing at school, and the teacher reported to the principal, who called the police. In the end, the criminal case was opened against the father, who was sentenced to 2 years in prison, while the girl was taken to the children's home. The whole case takes place in the Tula region, in the city called Yefremov. It's very close to Moscow. Unfortunately, it's not the first and certainly not the last case where the children were involved. Very often, when parents are charged with participating in protests, they immediately are asked if they are good parents at all, or if maybe their children should be taken away. And now the main question. So, can Putin be compared to Stalin? When Stalin was in power, he saw the purges as a way to consolidate the control over the Soviet Union. He targeted his potential opponents, but not only. He also targeted ordinary citizens, intellectuals, and even members of the Communist Party. The purges were carried out with ruthless efficiency by the NKVD, the Soviet secret police. And anyone deemed an enemy of the state was arrested, interrogated, and often sent to the forced labor camps, or even executed. The scale of the purges was enormous, with the estimates of the number of victims varying widely. Some historians estimated that as many as 1 million people were executed during the purges. The others say that the maximum number is 700,000. Nevertheless, the number is very, very high. The purges were a time of fear, paranoia, and unimaginable suffering of millions of people. The families were torn apart, and the entire communities were devastated by the arrests and executions. Even after the purges ended, many people were still living in constant fear of being accused of crimes that they hadn't committed. The purges also had a chilling effect on intellectual life in Soviet Union, with many writers, artists, and scholars being forced to self-censor or face persecution. This had a lasting impact on Soviet society and Soviet culture for the decades to come. While the purges officially ended in 1938, the effects lingered for years, with many people living in fear. The purges also had a profound impact on Soviet society, with the loss of so many lives and the destabilization of the Communist Party's leadership structure. From a political science perspective, the Great Purge of 1937 can be viewed as an example of state violence and repression, as well as consolidation of power by ruling elite. It was considered that the purges were being carried out in order to root out the enemies of the state and maintain political stability. But in reality, they were a tool for Stalin and his inner circle to eliminate any perceived threats to their power. The purges targeted not only political opponents, but also ordinary citizens. Doesn't it sound familiar? As we mentioned earlier, Putin's repressions have not yet reached a mass scale. Instead, they seem to be focused on instilling fear and intimidation among certain groups of people, rather than destroying them as a class. Both Stalin and Putin have used repression as a tool to maintain their grip of power and suppress dissent. Stalin's purges were carried out on a massive scale, targeting thousands of ordinary citizens, intellectuals, and even members of the Communist Party. Putin's repressions, on the other hand, have been more targeted, focusing more on specific individuals or specific groups that he perceives as a threat to his regime. Another important difference is that Putin's repressions have largely been carried out through legal means, such as criminal justice system, whereas Stalin's purges were often carried out using different means, such as secret trials and summary executions. While Putin's use of the legal system to silence his critics has been criticized by many politically motivated, it is still a more transparent and more predictable process than the arbitrary and often brutal methods used by Stalin. And finally, it is worth noting that the political and social context in which Stalin's purges and Putin's repressions have taken place are quite different. Stalin's purges occurred in the context of very centralized, one-party state with a highly authoritarian political culture, while Putin's repressions are taking place in the context of a little bit more pluralistic political system with greater civil society engagement and media scrutiny. And now we have internet. Despite some differences between Putin's regime and Stalin's, there are increasing similarities between the two. Putin's regime appears to be moving towards greater authoritarianism, and it shares some traits with Stalin's repressive regime, unfortunately. Thank you very much for watching your video. Please leave your comments and questions if you have any. And if you want to support me and this channel, please give me a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. See ya!